This video is intended for those of you who have recently ordered a SawStop, who are about to order one, and it's going to come any day now, and there's some things you need to know right before you get it and while you set it up. The first thing you need to know is that this thing is absurdly heavy. Now that's great, it lowers vibration, but when it comes off the truck, it's going to be in about 3 boxes. That's what mine came in. The rail for the front and these 2 back rails are in their own box, that's fine. The internals are all in a large box that has the wings that are removable in their own boxes. Carefully cut into the large box, don't ruin the integrity of the box, and remove the wings. That will take a good amount of the weight out. The fence came in its own box for me as well. Now this main cabinet is probably 300 pounds maybe, 250, 300. I was lucky enough to have a dolly and someone to help, but be very careful. You will blow out your back if you are not careful while trying to move this thing. I had to go down a grass hill and into my shop, so there really wasn't a way for me to do it alone. But please be very careful, it's extremely heavy. The second thing you need to know is that you're gonna really wanna rush and put this thing all together, but it's very important to do some tests and alignment before all of these wings are on. Now the first thing you're gonna wanna do is square the tabletop to the blade. It's much easier to access the rear Allen screws that hold it in place, as well as the 4 bolts that keep it from moving when these wings aren't on. It becomes a lot harder and heavier when they're on. So after you've wiped it all down, the first thing you're going to want to do is align the miter slot to the blade. Do that now. Also, set your degree stops. Check and see if it's at 90 and 45 and set your stops. Do that before. It's much harder to get under these wings and in there when it's all assembled. The next thing you're going to want to do before it's all assembled is take a look at the side panels internally and learn about the fact that you're going to eventually need to re-grease this. This was something I just came up to about a year or so in. It was time to re-grease all the gears and the moving mechanisms. SawStop has a really good video of this themselves, so I won't go through that, but there's a back panel and a side panel, and just open them up and familiarize yourself with where things are, because when it comes time down the road to do the greasing again, it really helps. SawStop recommended to me wheel bearing marine grease, which I use. I just got this off of Amazon, but that's the grease to use when it comes time to re-grease it. Just familiarize yourself. It's much more confusing afterwards to try and go and find everything when these wings are on. The next thing you need to know is that with your SawStop you get this miter gauge and these Allen wrenches. I still use the miter gauge, it's fine, I'm eventually going to upgrade, but I'm a year in and I still use it. However, they do not include all of the Allen wrenches. They only include these 4, or at least that's how many I got. To adjust the pins on the miter gauge that hold it in there, you're going to have to buy one of the smaller Allen wrenches to fit them. So don't think that you are using the wrong thing. If you're trying to adjust this to tighten it or loosen it, you have to buy a smaller Allen wrench size. The next thing I want to discuss when you're ordering your SawStop and planning is your dust collection. Now this is a relatively well done dust collection in that it has an opening right beneath the blade to funnel it down and through the back. Fine. But this is a very large internal cabinet, which means the amount of air pressure needed to pull it through is a lot. I use a rigid, just one of the orange Home Depot size vacuums. It's not strong enough. This thing gets a ton of dust in the bottom and I regularly have to clean it out. So just be prepared that if you want really good dust control, you're going to need a relatively powerful 4-inch system. I had to reduce mine down to 2.5. It's fine. It gets, 70% of the dust. But as you can see, there's plenty of dust all over this thing, and I regularly have to clean the cabinet out. And it also means I have to just clean out the parts of it more often. So dust control, consider if you have the money upgrading to something more powerful. A normal shop vac is really not enough for this machine to use its internal dust collection capabilities to the full extent. As you assemble, you're eventually going to get to the point where you need to put the wings on. And even though these are incredibly flat, beautiful cast iron wings, they're not perfect. And you will probably notice that they are either a little high on the 2 ends at the very end or a little low at the 2 ends. And what I suggest doing is connecting the bolt that's in the middle, holding these loosely. It really helps to have a second person. Attempting to do the best leveling you can, tightening the bolt in the middle, and then there are 2 options for what you can do. You can either get a dead blow hammer and tap on this until it bends down and then tighten that one and then do the next thing, do the next one over here. Or what I ended up doing was getting a big piece of, I believe it was MDF, 3/4 MDF, clamping it along here and just ratcheting the clamps down until they pulled them flat. I still had to tap a little bit, but SawStop basically said to me, dead blow hammer or do it that way. So if they don't come perfectly flat, don't be worried. You can, because they're cast iron, gently manipulate them. Do not go swinging like wild on these. But that is how you bring them down. You insert the screw into this one first, you lock it in. It will still be, it'll have this pivot ability to it. Then you pick one or the other, level that one, and then the next one you're gonna have to either press, tap, whatever to get it down. These are very heavy. It really helps to have someone else kind of help manipulate these while you're doing that. Now after you've got the wings on, another thing you're going to want to do is calibrate this fence once you've got the rail on, once everything is ready. You've already gone ahead and you've squared this to the blade, the miter slot to the blade. Now you got to do the fence to the miter slot. I highly suggest getting yourself a dial indicator. Now this one is part of a larger thing that slides in the miter slot. I cannot emphasize enough how much more accurate you can get this with a dial indicator than you can with a square. You've just spent thousands of dollars on a table saw, spend the $45 on a dial indicator. It really improves the performance. The next thing as you're assembling is that in the front there'll be a big long rail which your fence slides on. And you will have these back rail and front rail that it sits on. It's very slick. Do not try to set it up there and then move away. You have to hold it while you're tightening the bolts from underneath. It will slide right off. It's comically slick, to be honest. So just be very careful when you're putting on the fencing system that this big tube that's in the front, you have something, either you or a clamp or someone holding onto it while you insert the first few bolts. When you get the SawStop, all of the cast iron parts are covered in grease. Wipe that down, and then you're going to want to immediately go ahead and put a wax on top of it. Paste wax is generally what people use. There are other protective methods, but don't forget to do that. Don't get super excited and caught up in wanting to use it. Put the paste wax on right away, especially if you're in an outdoor shop. Cast iron will rust. Another thing I'll say is that when you get it, it's beautiful. Enjoy it because it will get scratched, dinged. If you use the wrong cleaner, you'll get some weird marks on here. So enjoy the pristine cast iron when it's new, and don't worry about it when it starts getting beaten up because it just happens. This is a tool. We're using our tool. Live with it. There are two final things here I want to touch on. The first is that the minute you get this, register it with SawStop. Have it in their system that you have received this and you own it. If there are any problems when it arrives, immediately call SawStop. And at any time you have problems, call them. They have some of the best customer service I've ever dealt with. I had a problem internally with mine about 3 or 4 months in with the little computer chip, presumably that's inside. It would not allow the blade to turn on when it was above about 1 inch. I went back and forth with SawStop for a while, and they ended up sending out an entire arbor block to replace it. Now, I had to put that on myself, or rather, had to find somebody that I knew that could help me put it on, but that's like $700 in free parts. They sent a couple brake cartridges as well. So it was a hassle, but call them if you have any problems, and since you've registered, you're within the 1-year warranty of defects early on. So don't forget to do that, or else you may be 9 months down the road and you have a problem and you didn't register. Just go ahead and do it. Take a picture of your receipt. Keep all the documentation that you own this SawStop, that you're the first owner, in case you have any warranty issues. All right, thanks. Let me know if you have any other questions. And I've got a few other videos on SawStop related, setting the stops, and a few other things on my channel as well. But please ask me any questions. I've had this for a little over a year now, so I've gotten through a lot of the kinks and figuring things out. It's a great saw. This is the 1.75. I'll just say ahead of time, if you can afford the 3 horsepower and have 220 power, get it. I've never had a problem with the 1.75 horsepower. I've been able to cut, 8/4 maple fine, but more power, more better, right? So that's just my recommendation. So if you're deciding what motor size to choose on, get the biggest motor you can afford. All right, have a good one.